very special guest tonight. Earth starlet of the news. You may know her from Democracy Now! She is one of our greatest national treasures. Amye Goodman, live from Earth via Visiogram. One of my questions, and I was gonna, tongue-in-cheek, I was gonna say, are you aware that I've been trying to reach you for the last 5 years to see if I could get one of our songs on your musical breaks?
Oh, you're the alien who has been trying to reach me?
To the aliens, you are the biggest star of Earth News. I appreciate you coming to visit us, and we have one question. What news
Chad, this
from
is
Earth?
interesting.
Well, Julian, it's a great honor to be with you, but the news is dire right now. I mean, as Noam Chomsky said, we are in the midst of the most significant election in U.S. history. And the stakes could not be higher in this country. I mean, we're talking about a road of fascism. That's what's happening right now. There is no question. There are so many people in this country who deeply believe in another world, and they don't see that in a Biden administration. But this really isn't about who exactly is in the White House. It's about whether there is a space for people to be able to function in a democratic way. Whether or not Biden supports a Green New Deal, that is something that movements are fighting for right now. And whoever's in the White House is just going to feel the pressure of that. But the number of lies that are spewing from the occupant in the White House right now, and not just words, but the actual actions that endanger so many. We are living in a time where, yes, we are number one in the world. We are number one for infections, for deaths. I mean, here we are in the United States in the midst of a global pandemic, so everyone is experiencing it. But here in the US, we have a little more than 4% of the population. But we have more than 20% of the infections and more than 20% of the deaths. This is absolutely horrifying, because what happens in this country also has such enormous implications for the rest of the world. I mean, the power of the one person who occupies the most powerful position on earth is just enormous. And yes, there is suffering every day, and there was certainly before Trump, but this has been taken to a new level. And we have to take this extremely seriously right now, because we're talking about the fate of the planet. When we talk about science denial, that goes to the issue of the coronavirus and how it is spreading. It goes to the issue of the climate crisis and how it is threatening the planet. We have to respect facts, we have to respect science, and we need a democratic process that allows people to be engaged.
Amen. Are you worried, how to get through to right-wing voters and conservative Fox News watchers, or are you just trying to appeal more to, left-wing people that are debating sitting it out?
Fox News watchers also get COVID. President Trump's staff also gets COVID, even his closest allies and supporters. And so I think this breaks through to...
Not even that. On top of getting COVID, they also get left at rallies in at below freezing temperature. I mean, the Trump supporters, despite their loyalty to the president, continue to get the shit end of the stick whenever you think about it. They have not only been duped into thinking that COVID's not real, end up contracting the virus, and then incur massive amounts of death, massive amounts of death. Not only are they incurring massive amounts of medical debt, they are also dying. The problem is that not enough people who support Donald Trump are emotionally impacted by their loved ones dying of coronavirus, which might be a reflection of the brain rot and the lack of empathy that conservatives tend to hold. But I digress. Not only are Trump supporters contracting and dying from COVID-19, they're also left out in the cold after a Trump rally where the bus that dropped them off forgot to pick them up. And somebody else had beautiful words about this and said that this is the perfect metaphor. It was a much more talented person in media said that this is a perfect metaphor of Trump leaving his constituents out in the cold. The problem is that his constituents are so loyal to him that they don't even realize what's happening. And that is truly, truly the tragedy in this scenario.
Everyone. On Democracy Now! And democracynow.org, I mean, we speak to a huge audience around the planet. And I really do think that those who deeply care about what's happening to the planet during this pandemic, those who care about the climate crisis, those who care about the growing inequality on the planet, those who care about war and peace, are not a fringe minority, not even a silent majority, but the silenced majority, silenced by the corporate media, which is why we have to take the media back. And that goes to this whole issue of the importance of independent media at this time. You know, Democracy Now! Is corporate free. So when we cover war and peace, we're not brought to you by the weapons manufacturers. When we cover the climate crisis, we're not brought to you by the oil, the gas, the coal companies, nuclear power. When we cover the healthcare crisis in this country, we're not brought to you by the insurance industry or big pharma. When we talk about inequality, we're not brought to you by the banks and the financial institutions. This information is independent, brought to everyone, by the listeners, the viewers, the readers, and that should be the future of all media, not only in the United States, but around the world. Media is essential to the functioning of a democratic society. We are part of a democratic media movement in the United States and around the world. And I think we have to connect the dots all over, because that really is the hope. How do people learn about the rest of the world? Now, in the United States, people learn about the rest of the world through a corporate media lens, and the rest of the world learns about us in the same way, unless they're going to, and there are more and more opportunities to get, independent information, and that is critical. I think the media can be the greatest force for peace on earth. Instead, all too often, it's wielded as a weapon of war. And that's why we have to challenge it. That's why we have to take it back. And it's not only Fox News. When you look at CNN, when you look at MSNBC, you get this small circle of pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. We have to go to the heart of the story by going to the people on.
Holy shit, Amy Goodman just spitting facts at us. So true. It's so true, chat. Listen, you know how I get whenever I try to give myself a pat on the back or I try to plug my stream or myself. I get real weird with it. But listen, I stand here and I say with confidence that I could do just as well, if not better a job, as some of these pundits on CNN. And holy fucking shit, child, please, for the love of God. I'm sorry about that. That's just the kid that just runs up and down the halls screaming at the top of their lungs. As I was saying, look, you know that you're not doing a very good job. You're not doing very well at your job if you have a dipshit like me who thinks that very little of themselves can do a better job as a political pundit on mainstream media. That's all I'm saying.
On the front lines, at the grassroots, and having them describe their own experience. Right now, what we're facing in this country is the obstacles are enormous, but the movements have the capacity to absolutely overcome them. We're talking now, Julian, just a little while after you had 13 men in Michigan arrested for domestic terrorism. That's right. I'm not even going to call them a militia. To dignify it in any of that way. It is a group of vigilantes, of terrorists nationally, and amazingly, even the Trump administration, not Trump himself, but those within the government, for example, in the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, have put out reports saying white supremacist extremists in this country, and that's redundant, of course, white supremacists and extremists. White supremacists, violent extremists pose the greatest threat to the, quote, homeland. I don't even like to use that term because of its resonance back to Germany, but pose the greatest threat in this country, that they have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds over the last years. The Michigan Attorney General, when they made the announcement of the arrest of these 13 men, if anyone had the idea they're kind of a group of, bumbling Keystone cops, said this is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you had Timothy McVeigh in 1995 blowing up the Oklahoma City building. He had ties to what was called the Michigan Militia. There are so many right now in this country who are armed, who are racist, who are white supremacist, and fiercely anti-government. This is extremely dangerous as we move into this election and beyond. We can make no bones about it. It is absolutely critical that we open up the discussion. And, it's something that President Trump does not want to happen. There's a reason why he calls the media the enemy of the American people. Because he understands if the media serves as a platform for people to speak for themselves, that is the greatest antidote to everything he represents. If you want to know what President Trump represents, he has flip-flopped on every issue over the years, but there is something in his very core that has never changed. It is his deep racism and misogyny. When they talk about, his roots with the Christian right, no, that is not his issue. Even the issue of abortion, he has changed on that over time. But racism, white supremacy, his antipathy, his hatred of women. I mean, his father was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally, and he follows in his father's footsteps. And this is extremely terrifying, especially as he feels he is losing ground. What it means in this country, what he could do, and what it means if he wants to distract attention using the rest of the world. The whole idea of wag the dog, of perhaps starting a war somewhere or in...
I love Amy Goodman, but let's also add one more thing. If she ends up talking about it in 5 seconds, my apologies, but also Donald Trump is a raging narcissist. He puts his own ego ahead of the American people, he always has, and that is the reason why he has taken issue with the media for quite some time, who have reported on his misgivings, his mismanagement of his own company, his bankruptcy, and this does leave a stain on his reputation to some. Donald Trump takes an issue with the media reporting objectively on Donald Trump whenever it makes Donald Trump look bad, right? So of course, if Donald Trump is the president and he is seeing the same amount of pushback. He's receiving the same amount of scrutiny. He's receiving the same amount of criticism. But other than just being the head of your own business, your own corporation, you are now in charge of the entire country. You are assuming the most powerful office perhaps in the world. You are going to be met with harsh criticism whenever you continue to fail miserably at your job. And he's an asshole. That's a given at this point. So whenever you have those who are in positions of the media, whether it be mainstream or an independent news outlet like Amye Goodman and Democracy Now!, pointing out Donald Trump's, not even his own personal character flaws, but his mismanagement as the president, his ineptitude as the president, his misgivings as the president, this is to be expected. It doesn't, the reason why we have the media is to allow for this representation, to allow for those who are not necessarily tied to any particular branch of government to have the freedom of press, to be able to report on what is happening within the government that offers us at least the semblance of transparency that we know what is going on. This is very much a democratic process in place that is supposed to give us, the public, the confidence in our government. Whenever Donald Trump tries to instill fear or a lack of confidence in our media, in our press, in an attempt to try to save face, this is the dismantling of our democratic processes. And it's all having to do with the fact that, again, Donald Trump is a raging narcissist turned into a megalomaniac now that he is in the highest, most important office in this country. Anyway, what were you saying, Queen Amye?
Intensifying
the real
one,
Queen
because he
Amye?
wants to distract people's attention away from the bitter truth he doesn't want to face at home.
What do you think of people like Don Lemon? Do you watch like their newscasts? I mean, you know, Anderson Cooper, all of those types. Like, how do you have any specific like thoughts when you hear them talk?
I mean, I really do think that the corporate networks, CNN and MSNBC, they have begun to find their backbone during a Trump administration. But we, as journalists, have to be the same during Democratic administrations as we are during Republican administrations. We have to hold those in power accountable. What I'm concerned about at these networks, as they do take a more oppositional role, as the media should, during any time of government, again, holding those in power accountable. I'm concerned about this consolidation of the national security state. The pundits they have on a regular basis, hour after an hour, government officials, top administrators with the CIA, with the National Security Agency, with the Pentagon, we have to question all of them. And it's absolutely critical when we, as the media after this election, that same fierce focus is also used.
Was there ever a moment when you seen one of them interviewing someone and you felt like they just totally let them off the hook? Are there like any examples or moments that you can go to like try to convince people like my mom to stop watching CNN?
Well, I think people should get information any which way they can. It's critical. In so many other countries in the rest of the world, people are so much more involved in politics, though now in the United States, I would say the awareness is very high. We're just celebrating the 25th anniversary of Democracy Now! And when I got the call to host this show, I was in a safe house in Haiti at a time of elections when people who declared their candidacies or people who went out to vote would be gunned down. and they still did it overwhelmingly. And I said, why would I do a daily election show in the United States when half the people don't vote? But I was very curious. I didn't think it was because of apathy. I think people do care. Did they think they didn't have a real choice? What were the reasons? I mean, people are engaged in their own communities, that they weren't getting deeply involved in politics at the national level. That all, I believe, has changed. But what I want to see in the networks, it's not so much about who the hosts are. It's about getting those voices out from the front line in these huge media spaces, going to where the silence is. It's a different kind of reality television. It's showing the reality of people's lives on the ground. That's what we need in this country. That's what will save us.
Have you witnessed your reach?
Oh my God, listen. I know that I say this over and over and over again, but to hear Amye Goodman say something that I say routinely, because it's something that I believe in wholeheartedly. And what I mean, chat, is that it is worth noting that if you are able-bodied, if you have the ability to engage in your community, if you can do the direct action work, if you can participate in volunteerism, then I highly suggest it. I highly suggest it, because that is the first step in a fundamental shift in the way in which we govern ourselves and we represent ourselves. It takes a community-driven effort to work together, to take care of one another, to find the best leaders who can then assume an official position, who will then have the opportunity to represent their constituency in a way that leads to fundamental shifts and change. And that really is the first step in reforming our own democratic processes, in ensuring that we have the best people representing these incredibly important offices, even at the smallest or localist of levels. I don't know if localist is even a word. I know that I say this routinely, and I don't want it to sound, I don't want this to come across as, I hope that it doesn't come across as the way that I have kind of laid this out, at the risk of sounding crass almost, or I don't know, dare I say, hi Leopard, thank you for the biddy. At the risk of sounding condescending, when I urge people to get out and participate in their own community because it's the right thing to do, understanding that not everybody has the ability to put themselves out there or spread themselves any more thin than they already are, right? This is a big ask. It's a big ask to find those who have the energy or have the capacity to take one for the team. If they aren't working 2 or 3 jobs, if they aren't coerced into participating in the economy to keep their head above water, if they aren't as much, if they aren't exploited to the same degree as a lot of their other community members or their neighbors, or maybe they just have the will, whatever the case may be, I know it's a big ask. It's a huge ask, in fact, and it's thankless. But it is the first step in a very crucial process of reforming our own democratic processes as individuals working as part of a collective, to see a shift in the way we represent ourselves. All right. Change happens at the bottom on up. Let's get back to it.
Or other truth spreaders actively being suppressed? Or, have you witnessed the power of advertisers ever changing a story or trying to change a story? Any specific moments that come to mind?
We are not
Kofefi? Did I sound
advertisement-driven.
Kofefi?
We don't take
Sorry.
money from the government or from corporations, so we are not in that situation. And as for networks that are, break every 5 or 6 minutes for an oil or a gas ad or for an ad for a military contractor, I think that it is not obvious, as it might be in other countries where someone calls a reporter from Boeing and says, you won't do the story. I think it's a kind of shared ideology, a bit of a consensus. People know how they can rise in a media organization and what will get them marginalized. And we have to change that landscape. And, what's happening today in this country, the power of the movements, it is changing things. And we have to continue along that path that allows the majority of people to be heard. It's the way we communicate with each other is through the media. It has to be honest, it has to be open. I see the media like a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day: war and peace, life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, you mentioned all these corporations that are part of they're not necessarily evil, they're maybe just trying to make money, but essentially have slowly become a kind of continuum of evil indirectly. Like, how do you navigate that in your own life? I wondered, where you grocery shop, or what kind of car, or do you get gas? Like what gas station do you? I mean, not that you need to necessarily answer these specific questions, but just, do you feel the need to navigate? Is that difficult to navigate in your own life, or do you feel like what you do on the news is kind of enough? I mean, or like the main weapon you have, and you have no choice where to get gas?
No, I think it's really important to be consistent. I don't have a car, and when it comes to going to the grocery store, it's always expressing deep appreciation to the cashiers, to the people who work in the grocery stores, because they are at such risk. I mean, to always, when being in the streets, express that kind of caring, because that's what's going to overcome everything. And that really is the hope when people say, how does one get through this time of despair and hopelessness? It's us expressing that kind of love and support to each other every which way. And I think movements are a magnification of that. Like the Black Lives Matter movement, people marching in the streets, wearing their masks, protecting each other, fighting to protect the planet, or those who care about the climate.
Chat, remember the Black Lives Matter protests we all tried to get out to? Think about that experience, and I'm sure that every single experience varies, but my experience, I'll go ahead and share it. It was a group of people standing together in solidarity as a very, albeit temporary, but functioning community. People were handing out food and water. There was medical supplies. They were taking care of one another. This is a really crucial thing to keep in mind. Whenever we see a community-led effort where everyone has a stake and everyone is participating and everyone is taking care of one another, this is the model from which we should try to strive in our community-led efforts, right? This embodiment of a shared vision and a collective movement where everyone has a stake in this process is something that we can achieve at the community level if we have the right people facilitating these movements, who are organizing at the local level, who are engaging in this organized move to ensure that everyone does have equal share to the decision-making process, whether it be with regard to land use decisions, resources, allocation of additional funds. This is precisely what people in the planning profession are supposed to do, in fact. They are tasked with this a position to try to, from an outside perspective, see how we can provide the tools and assistance to ensure that a community is functioning as a collective to the best of its ability, right? Sorry to get all planny on you, but...
Climate crisis out there, those who are challenging those who would profit off the pandemic. In our own personal lives, we have to care and show that kind of respect and live our lives in an egalitarian way, appreciate where the food chain is coming from, and all of the people who are on the front lines, showing deepest awe and respect for them.
Do you think the world is doomed and the resistance is too marginalized?
What the
Or
fuck?
Obviously, you're feeling hopeful still.
I do feel hopeful. I mean, I see we're in an extreme, dire time in this country, but movements are coming forward. They're rising to the occasion. People recognize across the political spectrum that the life we are living here now is not sustainable. And so I think we can't even imagine the new forms that movements and politics will take.
Thank you so much, and keep up the great work. And you are a national treasure, and it's just such an honor. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Julian, for all that you do. And until next time, stay safe, wear a mask, save lives. I think I'll put my shield on right now.
Oh.
What?
Powerful.
Antifa super subber or soldier.
Thank you so
Antifa
much.
super soldier
That
confirmed.
was our show.
Antifa
Great
super
guest.
subber. No, Chad, that's just what you are.